everyone, how's it going? Welcome to today's installment of Mike's Vehicle Vlogs. I do want to thank you for joining me today. If I sound a little stuffy, please forgive me. It is actually pretty late. It is almost 8:30 as I am making this. And for some reason, my nose tends to get pretty weird in the evening hours, so I may sound like I'm sick. I'm not sick, but it's just something that happens, especially now that the seasons are starting to change. So if I sound a little funny, I'm sorry. There's really nothing I can do about it right now. So basically, today, or tonight I should say, I figured we would do a sit-down vlog here at the desk, and we're going to talk about probably something very controversial in the automotive world. I don't know, maybe not as much as it used to be, maybe more, I don't know. But I figured I would go ahead and talk about the CVT transmission. And I think I've thought about talking about this because lately, when I'm on my YouTube account, and I'm going through, automotive videos and stuff. Lately, I've been watching, not necessarily watching, but coming across a lot of videos where people are pretty much telling you, don't buy a CVT car, don't do this, But honestly, as somebody who owns a car with a CVT transmission, I figured I would go ahead and just kind of put in my, 2 cents about it. Because there definitely are a lot of advantages to the CVT transmission. And, it goes without saying, pretty much like everything else nowadays when it comes to the automotive world, nothing is bulletproof, okay? So before I even get into it, yes, the CVTs can be failure prone, but so can everything else. Alright, there are a lot of conventional automatic transmissions out there that still have problems and they still fail. The CVT is not that much different when it comes to that. They'll last. And being a Honda technician, I have seen, I'm witnessing these, and there are things that you do have to do differently with them, and I'll cover that here basically as we kind of move on here in the vlog. But I mean, yeah, they're not perfect, but neither is anything else. So I guess basically you need to keep an open mind while we're going into this video. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of explain what I think of them. I have had my 17 Civic now for what, over 3.5 years now. So far, we're good. The car's coming up on 90,000 miles. Still its original CVT, still maintenanced, and so far, it's been good. Now, knock on wood. But nonetheless, guys, the way that I look at it, a CVT can be as reliable as anything else. A CVT can fail like anything else, So, what exactly is a CVT transmission? Now, a lot of you guys may have heard the acronym, a million times before. You don't really know what it is. It's a consistently variable transmission, and basically what that means is this transmission does not work the way that a conventional automatic or manual transmission work. There are no actual gear sets in this transmission. So when I say gear sets, I mean first gear, second gear, third gear. Those do not exist in this transmission. The whole point of the CVT transmission was for low, how do I put this? Cars like the Civic and like smaller cars, maybe some bigger cars, but like nothing too heavy duty. But is what I'm saying. But like cars that have a decent amount of power or torque. It provides pretty quick takeoff, pretty decent acceleration. But basically, it keeps the engine, at possibly at a consistent speed, or it basically keeps the power band up, without any power loss. So if you were accelerating, you're not going to have that slight loss of power, where a normal transmission would shift. It stays consistent. So you're not going to have that, that consistent buildup. The engine is always going to stay at a higher RPM if you're fully trying to accelerate, and you're not going to lose any power, until, something maxes out, whether you let off the gas or whatever. But yeah, the whole point of it is to basically keep the power without any loss of it during what would be gear changes. The transmission is automatically going to adjust that ratio, and there really is no fixed ratio in these things either. So, like I said, depending on what you need, I don't know why the camera keeps going out of focus, I'm sorry. But depending on, what you need, the transmission is basically going to make it happen, depending on your driving habits, your driving demands. On top of that, it really does help fuel economy. There again, because, if you were, for example, daily driving the Civic like I do, and just, around town and stuff, you're not going to put your foot to the floor and stuff. Usually, when you go to accelerate, that engine is not going, any higher than, somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 RPM. But then once it, gets to, normal like city traffic speed, like 35, 40 miles an hour, and that engine just kind of slowly goes back down, you're not consistently, like I said, revving that engine up to get to a certain gear shift point, and, then it goes back down and builds back up. So overall, the fuel economy is drastically better, usually with a CVT. In the, like I said, 3.5 years that I've had my Civic now, I still average anywhere, depending on the type of year or, trips and stuff. Sometimes that affects it, but I mean, usually I'm still averaging anywhere from 36 to 38 miles per gallon. And that's been my average, like I said, for about 3.5 years. So it's definitely a fuel saver. And honestly, overall, guys, I love having it. Now, when I bought my Civic, was I skeptical? Yeah, of course, because I have heard the horror stories of CVTs. And, I was a little nervous getting one. But after having one for so long now, and, I mean, all I could say is, I really do enjoy it. It is nice not having, it's kind of weird at first too, but it is nice not having, the shifts and such. In a way, it almost makes it feel like an electric vehicle, because, an electric vehicle, you don't have that either. You just take off, and you just have like a smooth, glide, basically, to your speed. And it's nice. It is a nice thing to have. So I've enjoyed it, and I've been a lot more relaxed, after really getting to know the car, and I really don't worry about it too much now. Honda probably does have one of the better CVTs out there. Not saying they're bulletproof, because yes, they do fail, and like I said, there's probably other reasons for it, but I have heard the Toyotas, they're good, but they're not good also. heard a lot about Nissan CVTs being poor, not gonna lie. So Nissan CVTs are the ones, you know, I would not buy a Nissan with a CVT just based on what I have seen and what I've read. But the Honda ones so far, like I said, I think they are one of the better ones. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. So how do these work? So there's not a whole lot that I'm gonna get into with this, because it's like a simple thing, but it's also not simple. There's two sides to this. But for the most part, the main components of a CVT transmission would be the two pulleys, which they call the conical pulleys, and a steel belt that goes around both of them. One of the pulleys would be considered like the input pulley, which is connected to the engine's crankshaft. The other one would be the output pulley, which goes to the drive wheels, essentially. Now there are other components, at least with the Honda ones I know of. You know, the Honda ones do have torque converters, like an automatic transmission would. They do have other various components that could be shared or are kind of similar with, you know, a conventional automatic. They do have valve bodies. There are, you know, planetary carrier, sun gears, obviously fluid pumps, friction rings and stuff. Like there are a lot more things in these than just, you know, what meets the eye. But the main components would be those two pulleys and the belt. I'm pretty sure with Honda ones, the belt is technically like it's almost like it's a rubber, I'm pretty sure, but I think it might be two rubber belts, but connecting in between them are like the little steel slots. I'm not exactly sure what they're called. I guess basically the way that it works is the pulleys, if you looked at them dead on where the belt's in the center, they're kind of cone shaped, so they kind of bevel inward. And how you get the different gear ratio, you know, would be if the pulleys, they expand and they contract, so they kind of look like this in a way. So if the belt is, or if the pulley contracts, it's going to push the belt to sit higher on that pulley. Therefore, when it's rotating, that pulley is actually going to be moving slower. And if the pulley expands, the belt is going to sit lower in that pulley, and it's going to cause that pulley to spin faster. You will always, if one changes, the other one is always going to change. So it's going to look kind of like that. There will never be an in-between. If one does any change, the other one is going to change also. And I was trying to think of like another way to kind of demonstrate that. So I thought of showing you guys with a old-fashioned cassette tape, because technically the cassette tape works the same way. So when you're looking at this cassette tape, picture the cog on the right hand side to be the input shaft, the input pulley, and picture the cog on the left to be the output pulley. As you're watching the tape spin here, the cog on the right is moving faster, which would indicate that the engine's RPMs are higher at this point, and the cog on the left is moving slower, which means technically the actual drive wheels, the actual wheels of the car would also be moving slower. This would simulate a low gear if it were like an automatic transmission. Higher RPM, lower vehicle speed. Now, if we fast forward here to the other end of the tape, once again, picture the right side, the right cog, to be the input shaft, and the other cog, the left cog, to be the output shaft. The input shaft is running slower, which would indicate lower engine RPM, while the output shaft is moving faster. And that would indicate a high gear. So this would be closer to a car moving faster at a cruising speed, while the engine is almost like in a final drive state. And as shown here, this is a little drastic, but if you look here at the tape, drastically going back and forth, that is basically what these cogs, or these input and output pulleys inside a CVT transmission do. If one changes, the other one will always change with it. And that is basically how you get the different adjustable, consistently variable gear ratios in that transmission. Hopefully my little cassette analogy kind of worked. I tried to think of the best way to kind of demonstrate that, and it is, you know, I mean, the way that I look at it, it's pretty similar. So yeah, so the pulleys, if the input pulley in the transmission is smaller, then the output pulley is going to be larger. And like I said, that's going to give you a low gear effect. Whereas if the input pulley is larger and the output pulley is smaller, that will be your high gear. So how do you keep a CVT from failing? Well, as I already said in the beginning of the video, there's never a 100% guarantee. However, there are things that you can do to keep your CVT healthy. The first thing, the major thing, absolutely important, and I think this is the part where people just are kind of like, you know, maintenance. The maintenance on a CVT transmission is absolutely the most important thing you can do to it. Fluid changes, at least for Hondas anyway, recommended every 30,000 miles. I'm not exactly sure what other manufacturers usually do, but I know for a fact with Hondas, every 30,000. Now, if you go over a little bit, you know, here and there, that's fine. There have been, you know, CVTs that I've done fluid, you know, changes on that were, you know, 50, 60, 70,000 miles, never had a fluid change. And you go to drain that fluid and, yeah, it's very, you know, it's dirty, it's, you know. Now, how the car drives, you know, I don't know. Obviously, the car comes in, the car leaves. So I don't know how it performs, you know, when it's past its fluid change date, you know. But regardless, you know, with mine, my car has a service history of having it done pretty much on time. So, you know, I've done it once since I've had it, and it's going to be due for its second CVT fluid change with me. You know, within, I think we're under 10,000 miles at this point, so I will probably do it, you know, either the next oil change or, you know, definitely the one after that. So it's getting close, but 30,000 miles on a Honda is what's recommended. The fluid is pretty thin if you actually see CVT fluid. I know I filmed the first CVT fluid change with my Civic since I've had it. And I kind of showed you guys, you know, it's a pretty thin fluid. So yeah, it's very important that that fluid stays changed. It's very important that all those internal parts stay lubricated and stay clean. So yes, that is the number one thing. The fluid absolutely needs to be maintained, you know, very, very close, in my opinion, to the recommended service interval. That being said, I highly advise that you only use the manufacturer approved fluid. And when I say that, I mean, if you have a Honda, I strictly recommend you buy the Honda CVT fluid from Honda. If it's Toyota, you buy it from Toyota. If it's Nissan, you buy it from Nissan. If it's Subaru, you buy it from Subaru. I know there are stickers on the hoods that usually say, like Honda fluid is called HCF2. So there will be a sticker that says use only Honda HCF2 or equivalent. So if you were to go buy something from like Pennzoil or Valvoline or whoever else out there puts out a CVT fluid and you decide to use that, make absolute sure that fluid meets the manufacturer specs. But yeah, for me though, obviously the only thing I put in it is the manufacturer fluid from the manufacturer. Kind of like with any transmission, you don't want to flush these things, and you definitely don't want to add any additives to the fluid for these things. There's really no need, to be quite honest. You shouldn't have to flush these as long as you keep the fluid clean and changed on time. And the additives, I don't even know if they make additives for CVT, to be honest with you, but I'm against additives for anything, to be quite honest. And flushes for that matter. If you flush an automatic transmission, there's a chance that you could be moving particles from one piece of a transmission to another that shouldn't be there, so just in general, I'm not one for flushes. I feel like some flushes will cause issues down the road. Drain and fills only for CVTs, in my opinion. You don't want to abuse these transmissions. So when I say abuse, you don't want to try to show off to your friends, turn traction control off and just floor this thing to the, put the pedal to the floor and try to get like a peel out or burn out or something. These transmissions are not performance, they really aren't. So you don't want to do stupid things with these transmissions like that. If you're like stuck in snow or I don't know, mud or something, and you try to do the whole rocking back and forth thing, CVTs don't really like that either. So usually with an automatic transmission, if you're stuck in snow or something, you can usually turn traction control off, put the car in drive, kind of give it some gas to get the wheels to move, hit the brake real quick, jam it into reverse, hit the gas again, try to get it to, you're trying to get to rock back and forth to get out of your situation. You got to be a little more careful with the CVT. You don't want to go full ham rocking back and forth with those. If you do decide to tow with the CVT, and I think there are some out there for light duty, but honestly I wouldn't do it anyway. But if you're gonna tow with a CVT, make sure you do not go over the recommended towing capacity of said vehicle. So that's a big one. But yeah, I mean, like I said, all of the CVTs, they're not bulletproof. They're definitely not the most reliable thing ever made. And like I said in the beginning, there are a lot of things nowadays in vehicles that are not 100% bulletproof as it is. It's just, another piece of machinery, and it has its advantages, has its disadvantages. But I'm pretty sure, I've been working for Honda for I guess 3.5 years. I've probably only seen 2 cars come in with CVT failure. One of them I know for sure was owner neglect. We covered that. So they did not change the fluid, and the fluid was actually black. And CVT fluid is not supposed to look black. Even when it's a used 30,000 mile fluid and it comes out, it's more of like a dark amber color. And when it goes in fresh, new CVT fluid, at least the Honda fluid, is very golden looking. So for it to look black is pretty bad. It was very dark. And it caused the belts to come apart in the transmission. So if the belt comes apart, you start having those little metal pieces from the belt, you know, fall into the pan and such. That's basically what happened. It grenaded. Like I said, these things still have valve bodies. They still have all kinds of passages that the fluid has to go through, you know, for certain commands. You know, I mean, like I said, there's a whole other technical side to this transmission, but if those passages, you know, get clogged up, you know, with dirt and debris and stuff, you know, from over time, you're gonna have a failure of some point. You know, if I'm pretty sure if either one of those pulleys lose tension without the other one doing it, that belt's just gonna come right off, because there's always constant tension on that belt, obviously. So if the belt gets slack in it because one of those pulleys is messed up or something, the belt has a good chance of coming apart, and that's it, game over. At Honda, we don't rebuild these transmissions. If a CVT fails, the entire CVT has to be replaced. That is Honda policy. Honda does not want any of their technicians opening up these transmissions. So if a transmission goes bad, you get another one. There's, you know. Now as far as independent transmission shops, I'm sure there are places that rebuild them, but at Honda, from everything that I've been told, you replace it. You don't open it. You can take the pan and stuff off. That's how we discovered the one was, you know, neglect. You know, you can see the damage inside of it and all of the crud and stuff from like the dark fluid, you know, and the pieces of belt. I wish I'd taken a picture of it. It was actually very interesting. So, but you're little, you know, you're not supposed to actually open up the main case of the transmission. So yeah, that's my take on it. And I don't know, I'm sure the comment section's probably gonna blow up. But I'll say it again, you know. I think they are more reliable than people think, but it also comes down to how they are treated. So if you're somebody who is hard on a car, and if you're somebody who doesn't want to, you know, do CVT fluid changes, every 6 oil changes, then yeah, don't get one. These are not for you. You know, but if you're somebody who, you know, tries to keep up with, you know, the maintenance of the car overall, and if you want good gas mileage, if you like the feeling of, you know, having smooth, constant acceleration and stuff like that, then the CVT is right up your alley. So that's all I've got, guys. I hope you found this interesting. You know, finally, like I said, I finally got to a point where I feel like I wanted to give my side of the CVT, since I was seeing so many negative things about them lately. But you know, like I said, I've got one going on 90,000 miles now, still original, still no problems, and you know, hopefully it'll stay that way. But I'll say it again, like anything else in automotive, whether it's the CVT or conventional automatic or an engine or whatever nowadays, you just don't know. It's just like anything else, you know, stuff happens. Alright, if you enjoyed this and found it informative or whatnot, thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I will see you guys in the next one, which will most likely be Myrtle Beach. So I'll see you guys. Take care.